Okay, so it's on your stage. Show us what's on and how you can impress all the political and social scientists on this topic, what they haven't achieved. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much all of you for being here. It is slightly linked to the European parliamentary elections because after this summer we will be having a new parliament and a new commission. And how will we get the pandas and the people in the black shiny cars to actually talk together? Where I believe strongly that we do have a European democracy, a European demos, but the problem is that it doesn't really talk to the people doing the policy. So how do we network these together?
So we're told that there are 5 possible ways that we can get past this problem with European democracy. 5 different ways in which we can make the European demos really work. And the first way is, fingers crossed, it'll all be just fine. When we get economic growth back again and we put a few more leaflets out, maybe use some infographics, they're pretty cool, then European democracy will be fine. We'll be back to the normal status quo where people, broadly speaking, ignore Europe for most of every 5 years and then cast a protest vote and everyone's happy.
The other solution proposed by a number of parties is, well, hang on a minute. This isn't working. Brussels is too far away. Nobody's listening. We need to return democracy back to the nation state, back to the 50s where families were families and you had real men and real women. So let's return back to the past and we will have proper democracy again.
Or the third one is asking President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who's pictured here, to have yet another constitutional convention. I don't know if any of you remember the last Constitutional Convention. I'm sure that you were all down at the front at all of their meetings, cheering. But the Constitutional Conventions are very long, very slow processes, and they tend to move the elephant maybe 5 centimetres in the right direction, but they don't really change things.
Another question would be, well, hang on a minute. We had a story about Europe providing peace and prosperity for all of its citizens. Now we need a new narrative. We need a new story about what Europe is about. Let's get a bunch of people sitting together in a room discussing what their idea of Europe would be, what their narrative of Europe would be, and then we would go out and present it to the great populations of Europe and say, this is the new narrative of Europe, this is what your Europe should be, and now you want to engage with it.
The fifth way we're told that this could happen, and this is perhaps the most seductive way, particularly at a conference like Republica, is occupy Europe. Let's just get citizens to do things by themselves. And as someone who runs an organisation called the Democratic Society, I'm very sympathetic to that. I think you do need more citizen participation and more citizen engagement. But the problem with doing it at a scale of 500 million is you also need some structure to go around it. If you just have 500 million or even 5 million general assemblies on the Occupy model, you'll get lots of conflicting decisions and lots of competing priorities. So we need something that's going to get past all of these solutions that won't quite work.
What we're also seeing is a large number of parties that aren't successful at a national stage for a number of reasons, coming forward and saying, let's go back to the 50s, let's go back to the nation state, let's close our borders, let's change policy as we know it now and detach ourselves from the European Union, from the cooperation with other member states of protecting minorities, protecting civil rights for all its citizens. You have populist politicians such as Geert Wilders and Marine Le Pen that you're seeing on the pictures. Or you have protest movements going onto the streets and saying, well, we don't agree with this. We don't want your idea of democracy. And you don't really provide any solutions forward to the problems that we're facing in Europe with either of them. Either you're protesting and saying, we don't want your idea of Europe, or you're saying, we want to sit in the parliament and protest within.
This is one of the reasons why the task is so urgent. Not because there's an immediate problem outside the doors today, but that the quality of the democracy is being hollowed out such that a smart populist or another crisis could produce something that really challenges the legitimacy of democracy. And for me, that's one of the biggest risks that we face, and also one of the reasons why the work that we're collectively doing here, trying to build a new participation and a new democracy, is the most important task that anyone has in Europe today. I also, echoing Karen, would point out that this is a moment of change. It's a moment of change not only for the personalities at the top, but also for new politicians who are going to be elected into the Parliament. We will have a new commission, we will have a new commission president, but also there are elections happening across the continent in the next few years. So there's plenty of opportunity if we can get our demands in, plenty of opportunity for us to say, well, look, listen to us. This is what we want to happen. This is how things need to change. Because I do think that there is an understanding in the political class that they're not getting it right. But there's also a lack of comprehension of what they could do to get it right.
So we are trying to present to you also what have we been doing in other spheres of engaging people, opening up democracy and involving the networks of interested political people into the democracy, because we are looking at political parties having less and less of membership, going to town hall meetings where nobody's there, and how do we start to change this?
So we're going to talk about three things that we've done. I'm going to talk about one of our projects that tries to find the people at local level who could have the democratic conversation that we're looking for. Karen will talk about what it's like campaigning in a new way, and I'm going to talk about one of our national projects in the UK. So first, our project in Lewes. I don't know if any of you know it, but it's a small town, a rural district, just outside Brighton, which is where we're based, about 100,000 people. And one of the things that's striking about Lewes is it has the highest electoral participation rate in the UK at the county-council elections recently, and a really active civic infrastructure. You can't throw a brick in Lewes without hitting 3 chairmen, a secretary, and an honorary treasurer of some society or other. So I think that if you can't get local scale democracy to work in Lewes, then you can't get it to work anywhere. And we're working with the district council and with the county council to try to find and connect the most civically active people in the district, to work out what the minimum viable connection is, the minimum viable network, to make the conversation with the council much less angry, much less confrontational, and much less sporadic, driven by specific events, and turn it into something that's more like a conversation. Very, very quickly to say what our early results are. First, it's really hard, much harder than we imagined when we started, because actually, every person's commitment to their organisation is a commitment to their organisation, not to the wider, better democratic conversation, even if that is what it turns into. And second, we found that the people who are best able to get us into the conversations that we didn't know were happening were what is sometimes characterised in the UK as the usual suspects, the people who are always talking to the council, who are complaining about things all the time. Because they are, although if you're a civil servant, they're quite annoying people, they're also really useful people because they know not only who they've spoken to, but also the people that they're finding it hard to reach.
I've been trying to say, well, what kind of politician would I like to see as a politician for myself? And what kind of politician would I like to become? So therefore, I wanted to apply the same demands for politicians to the kind of campaign that I was doing. My reach is not through normal party structures or reach through traditional media. I'm not a journalist, I'm not a celebrity. I am somebody with a following on Twitter and a knowledge about how to reach people through online networks and communities, been following what's been going on in the Middle East during 2010 and 11, and seen how people can network across borders, across structures, and change things. But I also wanted to see how can you, instead of just protest, how can you feed this into the political system? And that's why I decided to run as a politician. And running, I have been spending a lot of time using my social media networks and online communities, and they have also been proven to be a lot more effective than actually showing up to the physical meetings. Often you have meetings where you have the organizers, you have the campaign people of the candidates, and then you don't have a lot of other people. So engaging with the public, with voters, saying, I'm going to talk about this subject area, what should I know, what should I bring with me, has actually provided a lot more engagement and a lot more knowledge about what people are thinking of than the actual meeting that I've gone to subsequently. And this has brought me to think about, well, what are the actual structures that we're using in a democracy? During a campaign, you go out to sort of town hall meetings, you go out handing out leaflets, and people take them and they throw them out in the nearest bin. But are they actually listening? Are they the people who are engaged with what you're saying? And how do you try to reach these? You'd probably be able to have a much more targeted reach through the social media, where you can see, well, what are people actually interested in? What are they talking about? What are they discussing already? The question then is, it's sort of easy to bring that into a political campaign where you're running as a candidate. But once you're stuck within a national European Parliament, how do you then bring that into the processes of consultations, of amendments, of legislative processes with the Commission and the Council and the European Parliament? How do you feed in the activism and the support from networks into a political structure that is normally hierarchical and quite closed?
And the third project I want to talk about is NHS Citizen. NHS is the National Health Service in the UK. It's a single-payer system with about 50 million potential users. And we're working with 3 other organisations, Publica, Involve and the Tavistock Institute, to create a participation infrastructure to enable people to participate in decisions about their local health service. So just to quickly talk through how we've gone about it, we've tried to do everything in public. In the great tradition of projects, we're doing all of the things that we learnt from our Lewis work we should have done in Lewis for the NHS. And we're doing everything in public and involving people right at the start in talking about the way in which we want to design things. So what we've come up with at this stage, and it's a changing picture, is an outer circle on this diagram you can see, which is trying to find the different conversations that are already happening about the National Health Service, which obviously is a huge political issue in the UK, and join them all up. That's just to give an overview of the conversation, not by telling people to come to us, but by pointing out where the conversations are happening and making them more connected. The second part is Gather, which is a structure whereby people can say, I think the NHS board ought to be talking about this. It ought to be talking about diabetes, or it ought to be talking about hospitals. And that's something where you put a flag in the ground and say, I want to talk about this, and I take responsibility for starting a discussion and helping the discussion get to the end. And then finally, the most significant discussions and the most important national issues end up at an assembly meeting every 6 months, where the NHS board themselves sit down with the people who've been most active in this space. Now, I'm not saying that this is the answer to European democracy or indeed anything, but it's one way of trying to get an issue-based conversation going rather than a place-based conversation going. And that's one of the things that digital allows us to do, to break down the barriers between place and issue. So you could have a conversation about diabetes in the northeast of England and in the far southwest, connected up using digital tools. But you could also have a conversation about your hospital in your town hall that would be reported online.
So how do we do this? How do we start creating a network across Europe? We've seen, as with the NHS Citizen, that a lot of the European demos, a lot of the European discussions aren't based on geography, but are based on single issues. Where you've seen the demonstrations against ACTA, where you've seen Hughes' fish fight against fish discards, or the neonicotinoid ban to save bees. You've seen people being mobilized across Europe on these issues. You won't have a European discussion about larger issues that are more diverse, because people can't see how to change things within the European democracy and the European institutions. But you have these diverse networks of specialists, of people caring about single issues that go beyond geography and beyond nation states and borders. So we need to find out, how do we gather the information and the impetus and the movement from these networks and feed it into the European institutions and democracy.
And it has to have certain characteristics. This democracy has to be open and organic. It has to feel like you can be part of it wherever you are, and that it comes to find the conversations you're having, rather than saying, here's a big platform that you have to register on, which you have to get some piece of information by email to confirm your identity, and then you're allowed to participate. It has to be flexible in terms of people's identity and compare people's trustworthiness and representativeness depending on how much information they've given about themselves and how much they're participating. It has to be collaborative, but that doesn't mean it has to have no structure. There's a brilliant essay, which you haven't read, you really should, called The Tyranny of Structurelessness. And we want to avoid that by at least putting some of the characteristics of democracy into that space. So the European demos and the European political space has to be open, it has to be collaborative, but it also has to be known. It has to be based on a certainty of what you can find when you get there.
So how do we get institutions that behave differently than they have done previously? You've had very formalized structures of consultations, of putting out papers and waiting for proposals to come back. You've had an industry of lobbyists and industry interest organizations trying to feed in information and opinions to the institutions. But you've also had institutions that have seen their idea of engagement is holding conferences for a select few and afterwards publicizing the results of what these perhaps brilliant, perhaps not brilliant minds have thought up. I don't think that we should be looking at single events, single big showcases, but we need to have little by little, step by step, small issues where we engage with people and listen to what they're saying. We shouldn't be applying digital to a paper, just be applying digital to the process that we know from paper. We should have institutions that actually listen to and engage with citizens on smaller issues and in little steps, so that we have a continual dialogue that's not only every 5 years when there are elections.
I think the point about institutions is important, not because we're trying just to reform, the European Commission or national governments or civil services or whatever it is, although of course we are. It's also about understanding what are the new institutions that you need to make participative politics really work. So sometimes those new institutions will be the old institutions, same badge, same people, same address, but behaving completely differently. And sometimes, for some purposes, you'll need something new. And I think the most important part of that is understanding how you support collective action as much as how you support participation in government action. Because it's not about the government and the people. It's about the government and the community and the people. And we have to find the institutions that work to build community action, as well as the ones that work to improve the direct democratic relationship.
So how are we actually going to do this? If you talk to people in Brussels, they will talk about the Brussels bubble, about everybody in Brussels thinking about the same things, talking about the same things. You had the televised debate, which was shown on a select few TV channels across Europe, between the Spitzenkandidat for the European Commission, where everybody in the Brussels bubble was very concerned about this and debated who won the TV debate. But locally in different European countries, were people actually concerned? So that's why we feel that we need to be able to move beyond the normal people within the bubble and reach out to everybody in Lewis, in Colling, in Marseille. We need to be able to move beyond the bubble. As I said earlier, I think we need to be having small but multiple engagement, not these big stage conferences about a new narrative or a new constitutional treaty, because I don't think we will have the engagement that we need through the big stage things. We need to have the engagement where people feel that they're being listened to, that they have a voice in a European democracy, that democracy is not only national, it is not only municipal, but it is also European, and they are being listened to. And we should be making a network of the networks that you have nationally and make them work together and make the networks integrated into the structures of the European institutions. But these are only some of the sort of more loose ideas. We will have a new commission and we'll have a new parliament. They will probably be placed into the same frames as the old ones, and with civil servants and institutions that are used to working in the way of the past and the past commission and parliament. But how should we tell them to work differently with us? How should we tell them to listen and engage with the citizens of Europe? So that's why we came up with the idea of talking to you and listening to what your ideas are of 10 commandments of how they should be able to work better, to engage better, and to listen better. So have 10 commandments for the new Commission and new Parliament.
So when we were slated for this session, it was called a workshop. Now, I think I can do many things, probably more than I actually can, but holding a workshop in a room the size of a barn with about 100 people in darkness is something I've not really tried before. So I think the best thing to do is to focus online, where we've set up a discussion platform at demsoc.org/Europe and a pirate pad, so you can just collaboratively edit stuff at piratepad.nl, long string of characters that are up there. Or drop us an email or a tweet if you want to be part of this conversation. We know there are tons of people out there who are doing fantastic work on this already. Daphne from European Alternatives is in the room, because I've seen her tweeting. There are other people out there who we want to try to connect into this conversation, because this is something that has to come from civil society and from citizens collectively for themselves. It's about, by us, for us, and with us, rather than something that is explicitly about, telling government what to do. So I'd like to stop there, and if there's any questions, really happy to take them. And also, we're around for the rest of the day and online all the time, tweeting far too much to engage with later on.
All right, thanks very much. That was very interesting. I think that's a good idea to set up such a platform and then asking questions through that, because it's a very difficult topic that is not answered in just one or two sentences. But I thought it's really interesting, the new approaches that you have, and that you focus on local level and local projects, and then try to find the people who are interested and to find the communities. And I just have a question. What do you guys think of the European Citizens Initiative? Because that's kind of also a platform that is installed also was installed by the European or the contract of the Lisbon Treaty. Do you think it's also a way that people can connect stronger with their interests and formulate their interest towards the EU?
I mean, the European Citizens Initiative is a nice idea, but the way that it's been constructed is very difficult for people to actually put forward an initiative, collect the 1 million signatures within the allotted time frame, and move things forward. One of the successful, if not the only successful initiative, has been the Water Initiative, which has been successful because it had the European Green Party and a lot of local waterworks in Germany supporting it. So it's a European Citizens Initiative that has worked because it has political party and well-organized organizations behind it. So I think that the initiative, as it's constructed, has become too constrained, because perhaps out of fear of having too many strange and wacky ideas coming forward.
I think, just to add, if you haven't had a look at the European Commission's response to the successful Citizens Initiative on water rights, I really do recommend giving it a read, because it's a brilliant piece of writing. As a recovering bureaucrat myself, I appreciate what good bureaucratic writing is. And this spends 7 pages of a 12 or so page response patting the European Commission on the back, not merely for having a brilliant European Citizens Initiative scheme, but also for having really good policies on water. And, thanks for all of the ideas about water, guys, says the European Commission. We'll make sure those nasty national governments get it all right now. So I think it's, I'm joking, slightly exaggerating, but I do think that it can be good. Like Karen says, it's very hard to actually activate. It's very hard to get people going on it. And also, it is something that is specifically a request to government. And that's fine. Government is powerful. I want to make requests to government, but I also want to be able to do stuff myself. And so it's a bit consumer, a bit kind of petitioning the monarch for my tastes.
All right. Then thanks very much for being here for this very interesting workshop or discussion, and good luck for the running. I hope you have a lot of Danish Twitter followers that will turn out into your voters, and then maybe we see you in the parliament, and then we can Twitter with you and demand all our questions and demands we have. I hope you will be there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.